Hi there, and welcome to Plant CEO. In today's episode, I'd like to welcome Nicole Rawling, the co-founder and executive director of Materials Innovation Initiative. Hi, Nicole. How are you doing?
Very good. Thank you. How are you?
I'm very good. Great to have you on the show. Lots of things to talk to you today about. And at the moment, you're in California. That's where you live, right?
It is.
Lovely. So let's start by talking about what Material Innovation Initiative actually is.
Yeah. So now I really appreciate the opportunity to get the message out because we're a pretty new nonprofit, and so it's wonderful, to be
Right.
able to tell people about us. So we are a nonprofit, and we accelerate the development of next-gen materials, and that means materials that are animal-free and sustainable. And so we're working on creating a new industry of these high-performance, animal-free, and sustainable materials.
And what would you say are really the main opportunities in this space at the moment?
Oh, that's an excellent question. Actually, there's nothing but opportunity in this space. We really are seeing a lot of interest from consumers, from brands in the automotive industry, the fashion industry, home goods, and even investors. So what we focus on is alternatives to leather, wool, silk, down, fur, and exotic skins. And there's really not that many materials on the market right now, or many companies that are working on developing those next gen alternatives. And so we see huge opportunities for investors to get into the space, entrepreneurs to create new companies, and even scientists. There's a lack of material engineers, textile engineers in the industry.
Yeah, and I guess from investments at the moment in our space in the plant-based world, especially to do with food, there's a lot of investment going into food companies, right? And alternative proteins and cell-based proteins, etc. So this being quite a new area, there's also big opportunities also for those investors to do quite well.
Yeah, no, exactly. I mean, there's the plant-based food market is really saturated. There's a lot of money in the space. I mean, we're losing track now of how many companies are in the space, right? There is no beyond meat of the materials world. And so I think that is the really exciting opportunity, is that we can come in and create that new industry.
Yeah. So if you think about, I guess, materials and material design and innovation, they used to be quite big subjects at universities. And I'm not sure if it has been declining, or, especially with also like people going into like more of the hardware side of things versus more of like AI and software sort of development. But do you think that universities also need to have a stronger position to get new scientists to have, create many new projects and disciplines around this space at the same time? Or are you seeing that there's enough scientists already in this space?
Yeah, no, I think there definitely does need more scientists in the space. I think you're right. Probably when you're looking at the entrepreneurs and investors and people coming out of business school, what they're excited about, right? They look at where the industry is going, where the jobs are, where the money is, and a lot of that has been in tech and materials. If you think about it, it's not a very sexy business, right? A lot of people who want to get into fashion want to create a brand, right, with their name on, the bags or the clothes that go out. Materials, it's really a B2B business, right? The leather market, the leather industry is selling the leather to the brands, not to consumers directly. And I mean, leather, silk, wool, they really haven't changed over thousands of years. We've been using the same materials. And so not only is there a big opportunity to change that, but the systems are really outdated, right? Leather, I think it's a 23, 26 step process to create leather, right? That's a really inefficient system. And then when you look at the environmental impact of all these materials, all the greenhouse gases that come from raising animals, the land, all of those issues we see in the food industry in raising animals also apply to materials. So like I mentioned, the land use, the water use, all of that going into these living, breathing creatures that we then need to turn into a leather product, a wool product. It's a lot easier to take the plants directly and make them into that end material.
Yeah, and I think we'll talk about especially the environmental side in a bit. But thinking about, you've also done some interesting studies in the US market and also in China. It would be great to get some highlights of those studies.
Sure. Yeah, well, and I think that's an important thing, is that there's no opportunity in the space if the consumers won't buy the materials. And so we tried to understand where are US consumers, where are Chinese consumers at in their preferences. And actually, I will tell you that the results shocked me. And these were totally independent studies. We used consumer research experts. These weren't our friends on Facebook, right? This was independent people. 55% of consumers in the United States already would prefer to purchase a leather alternative over leather. That's more than half.
That's really good.
It is really good, and that's even assuming right now that these next gen, really more high performance materials are not on the market yet. And then it was even higher in China. It was 66% of Chinese consumers would prefer the leather alternative. And then we actually thought, well, let's see why. And most of us think it's because of the environment. People don't care about animals. Actually, in the United States, no, it's both. In both the United States and China, 47% of consumers would switch because of animals.
Okay, so was that the highest cause that they were looking to? Right.
It was. And then second highest was environment. It was 29% of US consumers would switch because of the environment, and 41% in China.
Okay, so I think if there's these startups that are looking to develop their products, maybe animals could be part of their key message, followed by the environment, right? It makes sense to have those in their USPs.
Well, and I think it really is interesting, like, to think about this differently, because it is different than food, right? And we don't have any studies on this yet, but just thinking through common sense, why food and materials would be different, right? Consumers don't have that cultural attachment to material like they do to food. Right? Most of us, food is a big part of your life. It's what your family does together. It's what you do with your friends. It's, recipes have been passed down through generations through either your culture or your family. You don't have that with materials.
Right.
I think also that most people have vegan materials already, right? I'm sure all of us have heard people say, oh, I don't eat vegan food. You're not a carnivore, right? You do eat vegetables, you do eat fruit. So I think with materials, everyone would say, yeah, well, I have non-vegan alternatives. I have that in my life, right? People have cotton. They realize that doesn't come from animals and isn't a material. Right. And then there's none of that addiction, right? So casein in milk is addictive, right? And you do have that, real like human need for it, that like visceral. And so that we don't have that in food either. And then actually we did another part of the study, which was technology. People don't like technology in their food, right? It scares them a little bit. And initial consumer research about lab grown meat, people were opposed to it. So we did actually, part of the study was, would people purchase leather grown from cells in a factory? And 76% of consumers in the United States said yes, and 80% in China. Wow. So that also goes to how consumers perceive these new developments. They're not as opposed as I think they would be in food.
So it could even leapfrog to some degree once we have more scale and opportunity with the adoption rates.
Yeah, I think they go hand in hand, right? I think that this, we have to think about the entire industry and the whole cow as well.
Mm.
That this is the cow is the outputs of the cow are bad for the environment, right? Not only up to the point of slaughter, where they're then turned into leather or turned into meat, but it's something that we need to deal with as a society and figure out lots of ways to replace the materials that come from those animals.
Yeah, and what I didn't know is that also, cows are being bred just for their skins. It's not necessarily that it's a byproduct from the meat industry.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. There's definitely brands I know who own their own cows, and we're learning a lot about this industry as well. A lot of the grade A leather, so the top of the line leather is sold out for years, right? Because if you think about it, it is a skin of an animal that can be bruised, it can be cut, and so if you really want that big piece of material that's going to make your high quality bag, it is hard to get the grade A, the top of the line leather.
Right. And I also heard that some of these people who may own these, farms where they're growing their own cattle, that a lot of the fences might be padded in order to protect their skin from being bruised or torn, and that just seems so kind of creepy and a bit bizarre to me, where they're given that much protection because of the value of their skin.
Yeah, and so that's another reason we think this is a great business opportunity, because if you're creating a material in a factory, from scratch, you don't have to worry about those same defects in the end material.
Got it. So you've also done some interesting partnerships, and there's been some cool highlights that you've had in your report from last year. It'd be great to touch on some of those, especially around the fashion and the automotive brands that you've been heard about in the industry.
Yeah. No, I think 2020 was actually a great year of partnerships in the next-gen material industry. We actually saw a lot of investments, and the brands, so like you mentioned, automotive and fashion, partnering with the material companies, right, to help them get the funds they need to develop the products and that expertise in the industry. So one of the biggest was actually Bolt Threads with their new Milo leather product. They had a partnership with Adidas, Lululemon, Kering, and Stella McCartney. So some really big names in fashion that are coming in and saying, basically, we believe in this product, we believe in this new industry, and really putting their names behind it, which is critical to get this going. We also saw a $13 million round led by Ralph Lauren in natural fiber welding. They also have a next-gen leather product. So let's see, Vigea, which is another leather company that makes leather from the byproduct of the wine industry. They announced a partnership with Bentley.
Yeah, and I think that's fantastic, because it is a byproduct from grapes that would normally be disregarded. So it's reducing food waste as well. So I think what they're doing is very cool.
Yeah, well, we are seeing a lot of these next-gen materials. They're much better for the environment. And that's part of the reason. And if we get into things like mycelium-based leather, which a lot of these companies are using, they are using agricultural waste as the main product.
Yeah, and that's mushroom-based, isn't it? That one.
Yes, mycelium, you take the fungal spores and you put it on the agricultural waste, whatever that plant-based product is, that the fungal spores will then start to grow,
right,
and create a leather-like product.
Yeah, cool. And then there was
Yeah.
some news from North Face, right? And Hugo Boss was the other one.
Yeah, so North Face partnered with Spiber. So they're creating a sweater. And then, yeah, Hugo Boss and Pinatex. And Pinatex is one of the few companies that's at scale that's producing products that are on the market right now that you can buy.
Yeah, and was that the pineapple-based one?
Yes.
Right. And that was was it from the leaves of the pineapple?
Yes, so they're taking pineapple leaves, so again, the waste of the pineapple industry, and creating it into a leather.
Yeah.
They're actually UK based. Their headquarters
Okay.
are in London.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So Mr. Del Monte would be quite happy with reducing that waste. The other thing is like I was thinking about the environment. Can you describe a little bit more about why, in general, say leather is bad for the environment? You spoke about the steps involved, but it'd be great to get some more color around that.
Yeah. Well, let me first preface it to say that how we account for the environmental impact of the cow, because you're not counting the entire environmental impact from that cow, because some of that cow goes to a different product, right? Actually, around 90% of the cow goes towards meat products, and it's about 5% that goes towards, or at least the value, 5% of the value of the cow goes towards leather. And so the way the industry calculates the environmental impact from the cow is it's an economic allocation. So since 5% of the value of the cow goes towards leather, 5% of the environmental impact of that cow up until slaughter is counted towards the environmental impact of leather. And then after slaughter, it's 100% of that environmental impact, because you're taking that material and all of it's going into leather. And so if you think about it, it's the very similar issues to the food industry, where you have an animal who's emitting greenhouse gases. So the methane that's going into the environment that's highly potent is coming from all of these animals. So we're looking at greenhouse gas emissions, eutrophication, and land use. So and water use. So some of those are the biggest issues with raising cattle. And then the same with going through the process. Those, I think it was 23 or 26 steps to create leather. Right. It's highly water intensive, and it's actually highly chemical intensive. So I think there's around 250 chemicals that can be used in the leather process, including ones that are harmful to humans, like chromium. And so I think it's, and even you try and protect the system, you try and ensure that those chemicals aren't released into the environment, but they inevitably are. And then not only that, it's the human impact from people who work in the industry around all those chemicals. Arsenic is another one.
Yeah, and all the health issues that are compounded after they've been in that industry, and the effects to their hands and the workers and the age that they're working at as well.
Yeah, there's a lot of indentured slave labor in these industries, especially in leather and silk.
Mm-hmm. So talk to me a little bit about the silk industry, something that I don't know enough about, but the silkworms, I think I read in one of your reports that there's millions of them that are basically boiled alive, and they're using the cocoons to make silk.
Number one, it's actually trillions.
Trillions. Okay. Wow.
Yeah, I know it's hard to wrap your head around that.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's about 1 trillion silkworms that are boiled alive every year for silk production. And again, when you have any industry that are using animals, the animals are a commodity, right? And so they're really not thought of as individuals. They're thought of as a means to create a product that brings that industry profit. And so you'll consistently see ways to cut costs, which unfortunately also means, negative effects for the animals. So it is the silk excretion from the silkworm, where they make a cocoon, around their bodies, where they're then going to transform into a moth. But if you allow that moth to break through the cocoon to emerge from the cocoon, and then you use the silk strands have been broken because the silkworm has escaped from the cocoon. Right. And so if you boil the cocoon before the silkworm or the moth escapes, they're then not breaking the cocoon, and you can unravel it in one strand, which is a lot easier for the industry.
And how do they actually unravel it? And then they're left with the dead silkworm in the middle, right? But there's some processes that do that, right?
Yeah, it's actually, I've been to a silk facility in China. Wow. Yeah, and it's really, and this is to me where it's just shocking to see now, right? I went actually a few years ago, but the silk process has not changed in thousands of years. So you have basically just boiling water in pots where they put the silk cocoons, and then there's a mechanism to sort of and this is where there's a lot of worker rights issues. They get burnt with the boiling water because they have to get the end of the silkworm silk off of the cocoon. They just put them onto a spindle and it pulls them out. So you have the water, if you can see my hands, you have the water with all the little tiny silkworm cocoons in it, and a strand from each of them coming out onto a spindle that just pulls. And so the silk unravels in the
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah. And thinking about innovation in that space, have you seen or come across any companies who are looking to recreate that in a new material form?
So there are a lot of companies that are working on next-gen silk. And I think this is the other area to me that's extremely exciting, where we're not limited by the biology of the silkworm, right? So here's an example. A lot of the companies are working on spider silk.
Okay, right.
Now, imagine trying to harvest spider silk. Yeah. Like, there's no possible way you could do that. Spiders are moving around, right? They're not going to sit there and just let you take silk out of them. Yeah. And so, but spider silk is so much stronger than silkworm silk. Yeah. And so that basic material, we can look at nature and say, here's a better product. How can we replicate that? And so mostly the way we're seeing the replication of silk is a precision fermentation process, which is where you're taking the protein from the animal, right? So whether it's like keratin or collagen, and you're putting that into a bacteria or yeast, that bacteria or yeast will grow that protein. And then you can extract it and make it into that end product.
Yeah, exactly. So that's very cool that there's that happening as well. And is there any other industries that you're quite excited about that are limiting, the use of animal skins?
Yeah, well, I think we advise a lot of investors and entrepreneurs and scientists. So if you're talking from the perspective of business opportunity, what I would say is there's not a lot of wool alternatives. So most of the development we're seeing right now is in silk and leather. So most companies are getting into one of those. We're seeing very little in wool so far that is able to replicate the end product. And what I want to make clear is we don't want to support companies or innovations that are producing a lower quality product. We're not asking brands, we're not asking consumers to sacrifice. We understand there's high performance needs, and these replacements need to meet those needs. So there are companies who are in the space, but just not at that high performance.
Okay, got it. So they've got to do more R&D to get there, basically. Yes. Yeah.
So there's huge opportunities in wool, and then I would say there's a lot of down alternatives on the market. I mean, I have my whole bedroom's down, right? I mean, Nextgen down.
Okay.
But it still hasn't taken over the traditional industry yet. So I could see a lot more plant-based sources of down coming forward. And then another option is exotic skins. So python, crocodile, stingray, emu, things like that, that are used by a lot of the luxury brands. And the luxury brands are not stopping. Actually, Hermes announced a few months ago that they put $40 million into a new crocodile farm. Yeah.
I'm disappointed about that. Whereas if they put $40 million towards, encouraging a startup or creating an incubator for finding these, or investing in some of these companies that would, like Ralph Lauren has, would be a better move, I think.
Yeah, we would have definitely liked to have seen that too. I think there would have been a huge opportunity, and I could have recommended a company for them to work with in exotic skins. So it's another area that we think is really exciting because the price point is a lot higher. And I think that's an issue that the industry needs to think about when you're getting into the new market. What is the price of the current material you're trying to replace? And can you actually get your material down to that price? I think most companies think they can, but they're going to operate at a loss in the beginning. With exotic skins, you may not need to, but you need to really ensure that you're replicating that high quality material that the luxury brands would need.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's not too late for those companies to engage you, right? To get your advice on this. So, that's my thing. Like, even if they've made a decision, they can always come to you and seek your advice.
Yeah, we would love to work with any brands who are interested. And actually, we do have a few. And we're working on a press release one now that we actually just entered into another partnership with a new brand. Because I think we're the experts in these next gen materials. We're the experts in this industry. And what the brands we're working with are really excited about is we're there at the very beginning. So if you look on our website, there's a lot of innovators who are listed that are public. We're working with probably around 10 to 15 companies who are not public. They're operating in stealth mode to create these new materials. The brands are not going to know about them, right, just from doing public searches. Whereas we know about this entire industry. We see where the pitfalls are in the scientific development. We see where other brands are looking and where there might be partnerships. And so all of our services are free. We are nonprofit, so all of our services are free to the entrepreneurs, to the scientists, to really get out this information, to really build up the industry. But we are charging brands who do have the money for consulting services to come in and help them understand the industry, who the players are, the science and technology, and help them source the materials.
Yeah. In terms of your existing brands, are there any that you can talk about on here?
So there is one that we are under strict NDA, but I can tell you it's a top French luxury brand. So to me, that was very exciting that they were interested in this space. And to me, it's really exciting because there's so much going on behind the scenes. They recognize that this is a new industry that will come forward. They just don't see the need to necessarily be public about it yet.
So let's talk a bit about your background story, actually. What sort of industry were you in before you co-founded this business with Stephanie Downs? Yeah.
Well, it's interesting. I feel like I've had quite a different career path. I am a lawyer. I did start out in corporate law, working on actually securities litigation in San Francisco for big Silicon Valley companies. And surprisingly, I actually loved it. It was more of my team and really challenging work. But it didn't fulfill my passion for changing the world and helping animals. So I started to do pro bono work, mainly for HSUS and the Animal Legal Defense Fund, suing factory farms for environmental violations, right? And the thing that frustrated me is that we always won and nothing changed.
You mean they'll set up again and carry on making the same mistake?
Yeah, they would get a fine and just continue on with business as normal. And so I wasn't making the effect that I wanted. And litigation is expensive, and these lawsuits took years. And so I really wanted to do something that was more impactful. And so actually right before founding MII, I was at the Good Food Institute. So I was there for 2 years, and I established all of their international operations. So anything that was outside the United States I was in charge of. And so it was wonderful. I got to travel the world, established operations in China, India, Brazil, Israel, and Europe. And all of them are doing, really well now. It's exciting to see how much interest there's been in, the plant-based meats around the world. And I really believe in the theory of change from the Good Food Institute, that's, we're basically copying them when we're doing MII, which is let's give consumers what they want. Consumers don't eat meat or wear leather because they want to harm an animal. They do it because it either tastes good or is a beautiful, functional material. And so how can we change that to give consumers what they want, but not harm animals and not harm the environment? And using science and technology, right, the powers of the market, we've seen that this has been so successful in the food industry. And I think we can do the exact same thing in the materials industry.
And where did your own personal passion come from to have a lot of compassion, I guess, for the animals?
According to my mom, I was just born this way. Yeah, she tells me stories where I actually went, pescatarian at 5. So I realized that we were eating meat, and meat came from an animal, and just inherently felt that was wrong. That, we had dogs at home. I had those animals that I interacted with, and I didn't see, the cows and the pigs and the chickens as being different than, our family pets. Yeah. And so, so I didn't quite make the connection with fish until a few years later when my dad took me fishing, and we caught a fish, and then I realized we were going to kill the fish and flipped out. And so, and then and this is actually a good story because I think it shows that people aren't perfect, and we all need to acknowledge our own struggles. So I started to go vegan in around 2001, 2002, went off eggs immediately, and went off US dairy. So I actually grew up in Europe. I grew up in Germany, and I just remembered seeing all the cows outside. Oh, the cows are happy. Like in Europe, the cows are treated differently. And of course, it was that I loved cheese, and it was very, very hard to give up cheese. And so I did the mental gymnastics necessary to ensure that I could continue eating something that I really loved. And it took me about another 3 years to give up.
Yeah. And it comes in transition times, right? It's not everyone's going to switch overnight, and it does come with time, and everyone's on their own journey towards this. Yeah. So I
think that's great way to put it. We just need to be compassionate and meet people where they are.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. And we know a lot of the change will come from the people who are already eating meat, or, vegetarians even. And then, that cycle will start to change. And, the numbers here in the UK are the predictions for this year is that 1 in 5 people will be veggie or meat free by the end of this year. So the stats are going in the right way, I think. And even if you look at big food companies now having a strategy towards plant-based food, then that's also going in the right direction. But when it comes to materials, I would like to see the big brands being more vocal about this, I think, and especially the ones that are heavily reliant on animal-based leather products, or silk skins, or down, or sheepskin wool. So all those companies should all be talking to you, I feel.
Well, and the thing is too, that I think they have to recognize is industry is changing. So if you think about leather as a product, if it really is true and people are moving away from eating meat, that just means that leather is going to continue to get more expensive because you're not going to have the supply that you do right now. And so it really does make sense to be a leader in this field and start looking into next gen materials now. Because what I can tell you, we've had brands come to us. I had a brand, it was around Thanksgiving, that wanted a next gen leather for a line now in spring 2021. And they wanted to pay us to help them do that. And I said, no, there's no way we can help you get that done. The materials are not in the market. And if they are, they're already, promised to other brands. So trying to get something even for a fall 2021 line is difficult. Like, we really need to be thinking out spring 2022. And so brands who are waiting are really going to miss out on the beginning of this industry and these potentially exclusive relationships with these material companies, because there just aren't enough there. And so we really do recommend at least brands talk to us so that we can give you that bigger insight of the market, and at least help you develop your plan for going forward, because the industry is going to change. It's just good to be on top of it.
Yeah. Is there any particular brands that you personally would like to work with that you haven't engaged with yet?
Oh, interesting. Nobody's asked me that question before.
Yeah, well,
yeah, I don't know. I mean, the weird thing is I don't feel fashionable on my own. So personally, I don't know. Actually, my sister works at Burberry. So
right.
Strangely enough, my sister's been in the luxury fashion industry her whole life.
Yeah. What does she do at Burberry? Is she?
She runs their global PR.
Okay, right.
So I would love to, just from a personal perspective, see somebody like Burberry lead the way. I think any of the luxury brands, I think it'd be really amazing to see them take responsibility and use their power of their name to lead the charge, right? That they, a lot of the big French luxury brands, or even in the United States, like, people respect them. They want to be like them. Make that synonymous with, animal friendly and environmentally friendly materials. And I honestly, consumers seem to be moving in that direction. So if you're trying to get the next, like, Gen Z or even millennials, they are really concerned about the environmental impact, right? Yeah. Their entire future on this planet really matters. And actually, a statistic we haven't talked about, when you look at the entire environmental impact of the fashion industry, the majority of it comes from their raw materials. So it's between, depending on what brand and what their output is, between 66 and 80% of a brand's environmental impact comes from their raw materials. And then when you look at all the raw materials and you look at the land use, water use, eutrophication, greenhouse gas emissions, animal materials make up 4 out of 5 of the worst offenders. And so this really is the best place for brands to focus if they want to be more sustainable.
Great. Yeah. So I wish you the best of luck with this mission that you're on, and really want to see more startups and more investments come into this space, as well as brands actually doing something about it now. Just a last question. When we spoke about scale of what's available now, there are some companies that can fulfill, big requirements right now, and then some other technologies that are still developing. Is that kind of right?
Not necessarily. I feel like there's There are, of course, the products that are synthetic, like all of us know pleather. We don't really support those because they're made from non-renewable sources.
Yes.
But if you're looking at true next-gen materials, there are very few that are at scale. So
Right.
one of the ones I mentioned was Pinatex. Actually, Natural Fiber Welding just announced they're building a new facility in Illinois to go to scale. And so they should be up and running pretty quickly. But there's not a lot of opportunities right now to purchase things for products right now, which is why it's so critical for brands to be thinking about this in their strategy, that this can't be a last minute decision. You have to be thinking about this even a year out.
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, fantastic. And definitely want to see some more innovation and more companies springing up, especially the ones that will have a big enough investment to get to the scale levels that these global, brands want, the fashion brands or even the automotive brands want. So cool. Thank you so much. And hopefully speak to you again soon.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
All right. Cheers. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.